Good evening, everyone. Communication is one of the most important skills in today's world. Whether you are a student, you're a working professional, an entrepreneur, or a leader, the ability to communicate effectively can open doors to opportunities, strengthen relationships, and accelerate career growth. No matter what field you choose, you all stand to benefit from becoming better communicators. With that in mind, Christ Online Degree Programs is delighted to host Dr. Carl L. Thameling, an accomplished scholar and educator in the field of human communication. We are confident that his insight and experience will help us better understand the power of communication in both our personal and professional lives. Welcome, Dr. Thameling, and thank you everyone for joining. Let's begin this enriching session.
Thank you. I want to thank Father Josie and Veronica, Cheryl, and the media staff here at the Center for Online Education for this opportunity to discuss a topic that's important to me, and that's communication apprehension. I got interested in this particular topic a long time ago. Like many of you, you may have had opportunities to where you could speak, but you did not raise your hand or did not offer your point of view. You kept quiet. And so I knew that one day that I wanted to be either in front of a camera or that I also wanted to be in front of an audience. So I also had to figure out how to overcome speech anxiety or communication apprehension. And so with that introduction, I'd like to now kind of proceed and with my presentation today. And that is that I want to first start with a definition of communication apprehension. So communication apprehension, and you've noticed in the first screen, it says communication apprehension, and then it also has speech anxiety under it. And so I'm going to move to the screen where it defines communication apprehension for you. And so you can see that this definition is from James McCroskey. Dr. McCroskey is no longer with us, but if you were to research his name, you would see that there were over 100 articles with his name attached to it, because this concept, communication apprehension, became a phenomenon in the field of communication and speech communication initially, but then the field of communication. And so let's look at this definition just for a moment. It says it defines communication apprehension as an individual's level of fear or anxiety associated with either real or anticipated communication with another person or persons. So this means that you're going to experience some sort of fear about speaking, even if you know that in advance that you're going to have to give a presentation, you would, probably be anxious. So a student or a professional who knows they're going to give a presentation the next day could be thinking about this way in advance because they're anticipating that they're going to have to speak. And so this may make them anxious. But what is anxiety? How would you define anxiety? What is anxiety to you? So some of you already know what it feels like to be anxious, and you may even say that you're nervous. But anxiety is how I explain it in the classroom is where you do sense that there's some sort of impending danger and you tense up. You're not really free to be who you are. Your gestures are not going to be free. Your facial expressions, your hands, you wouldn't use them freely, and you wouldn't really sound like yourself. Your voice would be constrained. And so we're going to talk about some of the symptoms about communication apprehension or the fear of communication. Let me talk a little bit more about this term. The communication apprehension also refers to the anxiety that you experience in other contexts. So communication apprehension is sort of a broad term that covers interpersonal settings, small group settings, and public speaking. So I'm going to narrow the discussion to public speaking, not just broadly like interpersonal and small group and public speaking. But let me talk about interpersonal and small group first. Interpersonal is communication that you have with one-on-one. So if Veronica and I were here just talking to each other, or if I was conducting an interview, then that's interpersonal communication. And so there are all kinds of settings where you're just talking to one other person. You could be your mom and dad, it could be your coworkers, it could be your boss and you, and that's an interpersonal setting. Well, some people, if you're out on a date, so some people get anxious in that particular kind of setting, just in the interpersonal setting. A small group is going to be anywhere between 3 and 5 people. It could be larger, but if it gets too large, then it gets into the public speaking. So some people are not themselves in small groups either. They don't feel it free, and so they're anxious in a small group setting. So anxiety can be context or situational, and you may not be anxious interpersonally, but you're going to be anxious maybe in a small group, but you could also in public speaking situations feel anxious. So again, communication apprehension is a term that's used to explain the kind of anxiety, not only in public speaking, but also in interpersonal and small group settings. But I'm going to narrow it to the public speaking setting here with you today. Now, there are 2 other things I want to say about communication apprehension before I get into speech anxiety. There are 2 types of communication apprehension, and that is trait apprehension. And so trait apprehension typically is where an individual has a tendency, they have this trait to be anxious, in particular public speaking or any situation where they're going to have to communicate, they may become anxious. So there's something about their disposition, about their personality that would make them anxious across settings. But if you have state apprehension, that's just where you're anxious because of the situation or setting. So in the classroom, you may not speak, but if you're outside the classroom and you're with friends, you feel comfortable in that particular state or situation, then you may not have anxiety. So trait and state anxiety. Communication trait and state communication apprehension. One other thing before we go any further, you should always remember that being anxious is normal because it's preparing you for a situation. Many of us don't always have to speak in public, so we may feel anxious and it's something new to us. So it is normal, but there are levels of anxiety that we have to think about that could be abnormal. So I often talk to students about high communication apprehension, moderate communication apprehension, and low. If you're in the high communication apprehension state, you typically are not going to be able to speak. You're not going to be able to do what I'm doing right now, because typically those individuals have symptoms where they could pass out, or they may want to flee the situation, or they may tremble, or they can't even find their words. So they may not be able to even complete the assignment, whatever the assignment, public speaking assignment may be. So typically people in the moderate area, moderate high, moderate to low, or moderate communication apprehension tend to be more effective because they're able to manage their anxiety in a way that makes them more effective in public speaking situations. Someone with low communication apprehension typically don't have the kind of energy that someone in the moderate level does. And so they may not seem as effective because they don't seem like they have anything to lose. So they're not always going to feel like they're got anything invested in the situation, and may not have the same kind of energy and enthusiasm for what they're speaking about as someone in the moderate level. I usually use a bell curve, half of a bell curve, and say, if you've got high communication apprehension, you're up here, moderate here, and then low. And typically the person with moderate levels of communication apprehension tends to be more effective in the public speaking or speaking situation. So as I told you, I wanted to focus more on speech anxiety. And I told you that anxiety is where you sense some sort of danger and you kind of tense up. And this is a definition, and I'm using Dr. Andrews. She's a friend of mine, and she wrote a book on public speaking. And so I wanted to use her definition of speech anxiety, and she defines speech anxiety as the fear, the timidity, the apprehension we experience when we speak in front of others. So many of you that are watching me today, you may be thinking you may have had some sort of experience where you were anxious. You felt some sort of fear come over you, and your adrenaline probably kicked in, and you knew that, hey, I'm in a situation where I don't really feel comfortable. Let's move forward. What are some causes of speech anxiety? And there are many of them. And so I'll try to cover as many as we can in our time. So, communication, speech anxiety. One of the things that's very common that happens in the public speaking situation is that your audience is going to evaluate you. They're going to be looking at you, but they could be thinking really good things about you. So they're going to evaluate you. So you're going to have anxiety because you feel that they're evaluating you. But it's really natural. That's just the natural things that humans do when they watch somebody, is that they judge them. Like, you may be judging me, as I'm speaking. So yes, you're going to evaluate, you're going to assess, and so that does happen. So it can cause you to feel anxious because of that particular, and we'll talk about that later, how to maybe overcome that. Here are 3 things about the audience that may make you feel anxious, and that is the size, familiarity, and similarity. And let's just take size. So I've spoken for large audiences, and then I teach classes with 110 students in them, and so that kind of size doesn't bother me. But let's say if the size became really small and became very intimate, sometimes people find that awkward and are not their best when the audience is small. They may like a large audience, so that gives them the kind of energy that they can feed off of when it's a large audience. But other people may find the intimate size too small and become intimidated by that size. Familiarity and similarity. Let's talk about those two just for a moment. Familiarity is who's in the audience. Who do you know? Is your family out in the audience? And is there a friend that's in the audience? And so are they familiar with you, and are you familiar with them? And does that make you feel anxious? Similarity is different. Similarity means, do you think the audience has the same attitudes or values or beliefs about the topic that you're discussing? So, or that you think that they're similar to you, you're probably not going to be as anxious. But if you think that they're really different and you have a controversial topic, then sometimes you're going to feel anxious in that situation. Many of us do have expectations of our abilities, and sometimes if you think um, you are going to be perfect, that may set you up in a situation where you think, oh, I can't make a mistake. So I will use myself for an example. I can remember when I would give presentations when I was younger, I would remember every mistake that I would make, and they would build up over the time. And so at the end, I felt like I was a complete failure. But most often, an audience really didn't notice all the little things that I did that I thought were mistakes. They never noticed, but I did. And so sometimes that would make me feel like I did worse than what I had. So what kind of expectations do you have about your abilities? Do you think you can't slur a word? Can you not speak as fluently? Can you mispronounce a word once? You can do that, but you don't want to mispronounce the word all the way through your presentation. So make sure you do work on that. They will notice if you mispronounce a word all the way through. Inadequate speech preparation can also make you anxious, and I think this is probably clear to you. If you have not practiced or you've not planned, for your presentation, you haven't done the research. So what does this mean? So you want to make sure that you've researched your topic thoroughly. You want to make sure that you practice your speech at least 4 times through. And that means that after you've conducted the research and you've put your speech together, you want to make sure you practice at least 4 times. And I often take each section of my presentation, the introduction, the body, and the conclusion, and I'll work on each one of those separately until I can put it all together. And I often think about what's in the introduction. I also visualize, like if I'm in a room and there's a closet here, and a closet here, I know what I want in this first closet. The door opens up and this is my introduction, and I know I have an attention getting device I want to use. It's going to come out that closet. Then the next thing comes out, thesis, audience adaptations, those sorts of things. Then your next closet could be your body, and then the next closet opens up, and that could be your conclusion, which would bring the speech together. So if you don't prepare for your speech, your presentation, if it's not a speech, it's a presentation, you're at a conference. If you did not prepare for that, then you're going to feel anxious. And whose fault is that if you've not prepared? Not to blame you, okay? But you want to make sure that you're prepared. So sometimes people, individual speakers, presenters, wherever they are, they also may feel anxious because they misunderstand their body. They don't understand what's going on with their body physiologically. So we're going to look at or examine some of the symptoms that people experience when they have speech anxiety. What are some of the physiological reactions that people do have? Parched mouth. So if you have a parched mouth, you may, and sometimes people's mouth feels like it's cotton, and you may want to have a bottle of water there, and you may want to open that bottle of water as I'm demonstrating here. Take you a drink. Excuse me. And you may you have it right, you can stop and take a drink so that you can go on, so your mouth will feel that it's can be used in a way that makes you more effective. Some people feel like they don't have the right to breathe when they're giving a presentation. So you have a right to breathe, so you want to stop if you think that you've not been breathing properly and take a breath. Because sometimes people speak real fast and they're not taking breaths, so they're going to start losing their ability to project. So you want to make sure you do diaphragm, use your diaphragm, breathe deeply when you're speaking. And so that so if you just take short breaths like this when you're speaking, you're going to not have the ability to keep up your energy and your stamina. So some people do experience a shortness of breath when they become anxious. Trembling legs or hands. Now, I think that's self-explanatory, but people, their hands and their legs will start shaking, and that makes them feel wobbly. Red throat blotches. I don't know if you've ever seen a speaker, but sometimes their neck does get red. I had a friend, and Steve, and Steve was a real tall guy. He was about 6'6", and he would give presentations in class. And I asked him, I said, Steve, did you know that your neck gets real red when you give a presentation? He said, yeah, Carl, I do. But he was always effective. He was always effective, but that's just one way his body reacted to a public speaking situation. So physiologically, this is what would happen to his body. Knotted stomach. Sometimes people feel like their stomach's in a knot and they're sick, or it's just tied up, and that kind of confuses them. So here again, these are some things that happen to your body, and you should be aware of it. That you may get a shortness of breath. You may have trembling legs and hands. You may get a knotted stomach. Some of us get hot flashes. Your face will feel like it's flushed. So that's just another normal response to a public speaking situation. Here again, anxiety is normal. It's just that what is the level of your anxiety? That's what could be making you ineffective. So understanding what will happen to your body when you speak is something that you really need to be aware of and say, hey, that's just one way my body's reacting to this situation. What can I do about it at this particular time? Can I calm myself down so that I can move forward and be effective? So again, I told you earlier that some people have the inability that they can't gesture when they're giving a presentation. They're not going to use their face. They don't want to use their hands, you know, those sorts of things so that they look natural when they're speaking. What are some things about there's some misconceptions, and the word misconception also means falsehoods. These also can contribute to you feeling anxious when you're giving a speech. So let's talk about some of those. Many people think that everyone will know that I'm anxious, and that's not often the case. Your body is like I don't know in India, but if they have a candy like M&M, so the body's kind of like a M&M sometimes. You don't know, it's got a hard shell, and we don't often see what's going on inside your body. So everyone doesn't always know that you're anxious. Often it's not that obvious. Some people, yes. Many people, yes, their anxiety could show. But a lot of times we won't know that you're anxious unless it's really, really obvious. All right. While we're here speaking about this, everyone will know I used to teach a class for students who suffered from severe speech anxiety. Because you remember I told you I wanted to be successful. I wanted to be able to speak in the classroom. I wanted to do things in public. So I wanted to overcome my anxiety. So at one point I did co-teach a class with a colleague of mine where we had students who suffered from severe speech anxiety. And one of the things that we did in that classroom is that we would videotape them. And so would they deliver their speech, we'd videotape it, and then we would go over the speech with them and go over the video with them. One of the things we found out is that the student would drop out of the class. And we wanted to find out why were they dropping out. It wasn't because they were scared. We found out that the videotape, once they saw the videotape and they found that their anxiety wasn't showing, they said, oh, well, I don't need this class, they thought, and so they just, dropped out. So videotaping yourself, which we could talk about in a bit, is one way that you can help yourself determine what is the state of my anxiety. What does it look like to me? If I see it on a video, how does it look to others? Some people believe they're under the false conception that their speech anxiety is going to intensify. I'm not going to say it doesn't happen for some people, but within about 15 to 25 seconds, our anxiety levels start decreasing. Once you get into your presentation and you are, moving through your introduction, you're getting through your body, and, your anxiety starts to pull away. So it's not always the case that it's going to intensify. But I can't say that it doesn't happen for some, but it doesn't happen for everyone. So majority of us, once we get in front of an audience and we start speaking, our anxiety will decrease. Before I go any further, I taught an online public speaking class, and so you would think that students would be, I was thinking, how did they manage their anxiety? And many of the students who were online, they had to videotape themselves. They had to get an audience. And many of them were able to complete that assignment without any kind of visible signs of them having anxiety. So I haven't really done the research on that, but I would like to see if students who are on an online course, like we're at an online platform, and so this is the Center for Online Education, it'd be interesting to conduct a study to see if students, what is their level of anxiety of the students who have to deliver a speech online as opposed to students who have to give the speech live. So when I had taught the online course, the students still had to get an audience. They still had to not have an audience there, and they had to deliver an introduction, informative, a persuasive speech, and a personal experience speech. But it would be interesting to conduct that study to see if the anxieties are different and how fearful are the students when they deliver a speech. Some people think they're under the misconception, the falsehood, that anxiety will ruin the effect of their speech. In fact, it's good to have some anxiety and use it as a source of energy. Play on it and think about, hey, I I'm anxious, but I can maybe use this to my benefit, and won't. It's not going to ruin your speech because you are going to be perceived that you have some sort of energy and enthusiasm, and it's probably better to look that way than not have any energy. Another misconception is that many people think our audience is going to be hostile, okay? And in fact, majority of times your audience is going to be supportive. They're not going to be uh, the angry mob that you think you may see online, okay? And so they are actually going to be very supportive to you. So don't think that your audience is, because if you start having that mindset, then you're only going to set yourself up for more anxiety. So it's best to think about your audience really going to be supportive and friendly rather than hostile. The only way that you would, if you are known for a particular controversial issue, that's possible, but in most cases, this is not the case. Um, in fact, in a classroom, many students know they're going to have to give a speech, so they often are very empathetic and sympathetic toward their peers because they're going to be in the same spot as their peer is and presently who's delivering this assignment. So what are some strategies that we can use, that we can employ, that can help us manage our speech anxiety? And remember, I'm talking about speech anxiety, and I did not get into all the social anxieties, and there are different kinds of classifications of anxieties, and that is not my field. I'm not a psychologist, and I'm not a psychiatrist, but we're talking about everyday situations where people have to, or been given an assignment where they have to speak in public. But some of these strategies can help most people who have some levels of anxiety and generally in most situations. So I don't want to take in all the anxieties that people experience, but we're focusing specifically on speech anxiety. So here's some strategies that we can put into place to help us manage, and you may have your own. Remember, I told you if you didn't prepare for your presentation, then you should feel anxious. Okay, you have to own that. I didn't prepare, and some students and people
Sure.
honestly I didn't prepare. And so what does preparation mean? Remember, you have to research your topic. You want to know what the topic as well as you can. You want to be able to talk about it freely. And so in a conversational style, you don't want to read anything. You want to have your notes in front of you. You may have to read a quote if it's a direct quote. So, but practice your speech, and as I say, practice at least 4 times. And this is after you've researched it and you put it into an outline format. You have an introduction, a body, and a conclusion, and your references. You want to make sure that you prepare. And when some people prepare, they don't think that they should be doing it out loud, but you should also prepare out loud. You should
Mm-hmm.
not just do it in your head. You need to practice it out loud. Prepare, and in a textbook I use for one of my public speaking classes, the author in there cites a study where peers, if a student had one of their peers to watch their and listen to their presentation, it often improved the quality of the speech. So speaking in front of your peers sometimes can be beneficial in preparing. They can maybe give you the feedback that you want. I know that may seem I'm not trying to contradict myself earlier when I told you about how familiar you are with the audience, but in this case there are studies that suggest speaking in front of your peers can help improve the quality of your presentation. Preparation, research, practice out loud, have an outline, go over it, and at least speak it out loud at least 4 times. Anticipate the speech situation. What does that mean? Well, Veronica and I met, and we came in this studio um, several weeks ago before, and so because I asked her, I'd like to look at the studio, I'd like to look at where I'm going to be presenting because I want to know what the situation is like. So I have to think ahead. What's the situation going to be like? So this also means, is the equipment working? Are we going to have trouble with the equipment? Are we going to be able to, am I going to be able to go overcome if the equipment's not working? How many people are going to be in the audience? Um, did I bring enough copies for everyone in the audience? If that's what I want to do is to pass out copies, but in these days and times, people often just want to show it online instead of make a copy. So, what's the size of the room? Who's there? What equipment am I going to be using? What if the equipment I'm going to use fails? How am I going to, regroup and move forward so that I can be effective in that situation? Exercise for relaxation. This doesn't mean go out and run a marathon, okay? This means to go out and think about some isometric exercises. If you don't know what isometric exercises are, what it is just tensing up your body, pressing in and stiffening up your muscles in your body and counting to like 10 and then releasing. Tense up again and release. These are isometric exercises. You may want to do some yoga. I would not recommend meditation because it may relax you too much. And you certainly don't want to go out and run a marathon. But try to do maybe complete some yoga or isometric exercises. Here again, tense up, release, tense up, count to 10, release. Do that throughout your body. Stand up too when you're doing it because that can help you keep your balance. You'll know what your balance is like. So we've heard of active and passive listeners. And so if you stay with the speaker and typically and don't get caught up in one thing that the speaker said. So for instance, I'm on active listening, but you're still at preparation. You're not with me. And so you want, as a speaker, you want to be able to listen to your audience as well. And so try to stay with them and not be distracted by what's going on in your head about your presentation. You want to be able to listen to them as well. Now, chemicals, there are prescription drugs that some students will take, and I'm talking from a Western perspective. Some students may take a particular medication that will calm them down, that helps them with their anxiety. And I don't really want to mention what some of those drugs are online, and so but um, students who have anxiety or have social anxiety, they know what those particular drugs are that they have to take. But some people will they also will drink. And so I do not recommend that you drink any kind of alcohol before you get up in front of an audience. And that's what some students have done in the past. But so what's the drawback to that? You're not going to be able to speak clearly. You're not going to be able to use your teeth, tongue, and lips in a manner that was going, because you're going to slur your words. So you want to make sure that you know, don't use chemicals that's going to um, I guess I would say that I don't want to say damage, but would retard your ability to speak clearly. I know that you have some suggestions as well, probably on how to deal with speech anxiety. And I want to just share one other. Um, these are just sort of what natural things that you can do that can give you the confidence. And that's what you're wanting to work on is have the confidence to get up in front of others so that you can speak freely. And that was my goal. I wanted to be able to speak to audience members and feel free and be who I am as an individual. So now, as I said, this is a student, a female student. She said to me, she said, Dr. Tamley, one of the things that I do is I think about what I'm going to wear that day. All right. Because that can give me confidence. So does it fit right? Is the color look good? You know, all of those shape of it, all of those sorts of things can make a difference. And so guys for the same way too. You may want to make sure what you're wearing. Do you feel confident with what you have on? Is this something that that makes you feel that, hey, this is going to be a success. I'm going to be a success. So think about what you're wearing that particular day. Remember, public speaking or giving a presentation is not an informal, it's not a chit chat. It's a formal presentation, and you really want to think about your language that you're going to use and how you look and how you dress for that particular day. What are some other suggestions? And maybe I should pause. I don't know if there's any suggestions or any questions at
There's
this.
so many questions that have come in.
Oh, really?
So I'm waiting for your presentation,
Right.
so then we can start answering them. Probably you already have it in your presentation,
Yes.
but I can just start reading out the questions to you and you could start
Sure.
answering them.
May I just say one more thing?
Sure.
It is that the power of positive thinking is nothing that you should take lightly. So having a positive attitude, say, oh, I don't know how, I can't do this speech. You may want to reverse that and say, look, this is my first major speech, and it's not going to be the end of my life. I'll get through it. So think about how, if you're giving yourself negative messages, sending yourself negative message, replace that with something positive. Don't expect yourself to be perfect on the first speech, but do strive to be the best that you possibly can. All right. So let's see, what are some of the questions?
Thank you, doctor. So the first question is that when I get speech anxiety, I start stammering. What can I do for that?
Sure. So one thing to do would be pause. Take a minute to pause and collect your thinking, because sometimes what happens is that our mind and our mouth are not working together. And so one's getting ahead of itself. So stop, pause just for a minute. You have that right. And then proceed.
So we just, gather ourselves together because we're anxious at that moment.
Mhm.
And then I think that pausing is going to help us breathe, relax, and get everything together. And then we can go ahead.
Proceed, that's right.
Yes.
Because typically, as I said, you're stammering because there could be a number of reasons, but one of them is that you're nervous, okay?
Mhm.
But also your mind and mouth are not really together yet, all right? So it's best that you stop and just pause, take a deep breath before you go any further. And you're not the first person that stammered either. So give yourself a break.
Sure, thank you. And the next question is, how do I gain confidence to speak?
Okay, that's a good question. So what if informed friends, students, and colleagues, and many of them know this, is that just take opportunities at home to speak, or you can join an organization in your community that gives you opportunities to speak before you maybe take a class. So just take every opportunity. So just for example, so let's say that you're at home and you're it's a celebration, and you're the individual that's your parents are going to say, okay, they know you want to improve, so they're going to give you the opportunity to start celebrating. You may want to say, you want to maybe introduce who's there and tell everyone why we're here and why we're celebrating this particular situation. If you are in any kind of, if you're involved with your church, try to take roles at your church where you can speak. Um, but as I said, there are organizations often in your community that gives you the opportunity to practice. But anytime there's an opportunity for you to speak, try to give yourself that permission
Mm-hmm.
and say, hey, let me do that. Let me call them. Okay. Let me take the lead on this. Let me introduce them. Those sorts of things.
So we start taking initiative. We
Yes,
know
that's
we're
right.
we have the fear, but we need a platform to overcome that.
That's exactly right. And just give yourself the chance, risk of failure. You know, you may fail, but you can always come back. And we've all done things that are embarrassing to ourselves, but don't let that deter you. Use that as a learning opportunity. Don't let that hold you back. That was a learning opportunity. Let's move forward and let's try it again.
I agree on that. The next question is, what is the most effective technique to reduce nervousness before speaking in public?
Okay. There are multiple things, but I really find that here again, I think preparing, but also breathing and exercising are really good before you begin. And always, I like to make sure I have plenty of rest. I'm not a person that if I have a presentation the next day, I don't let it keep me up at night.
Mhm.
I make sure I get plenty of rest so that because it takes a lot of energy to communicate. And so you want to make sure you get your rest, but right before, I don't often, I like talking to the audience as well. So sometimes I'll go out and talk to people in the audience, and I find that is a good way to kind of help me
Connect with
yeah,
them. Yeah.
connect with the audience and that. But if you're a person that needs a little bit of distance and you want to stay behind, then try to think about some breathing techniques and some of your exercises that I mentioned, that stretching, and also having isometric exercises. Those can help you prepare beforehand.
Thank you. And the next question is, how to gesture with your hands or face?
Okay.
I think
So,
your expressions or gestures is what they're asking
yeah,
about.
that's right. Exactly. I hope I used my face. I mean, because I think it's smiling. So whenever you use your face, but you want to make sure that the facial expression matches whatever you're talking about. So you don't want to make sure so if you think something's funny, hopefully you're smiling and showing that. Now, hand gestures and movement, and I know you didn't ask me about, but you did ask me about gestures. Really, I teach purposeful movement. And that typically means that if I'm going to make a hand gesture, I hope it has some particular purpose. It may emphasize something I'm saying. So, for instance, if the books are stacked this high, I hope I would make that kind of gesture, okay? And say, or what time is it? Okay. Hello in there. So you would hope that all of those gestures go with your face and body, okay? So you wouldn't want to go, hello, what time is it? Okay. Hello, who's in there? What time is it? So make sure that you have the energy and the tone and expression in your voice goes along with your gestures. But that's purposeful movement. When you say the books are stacked this high, um, someone knocked at my door. Someone waved for me to come toward them.
Mhm.
All of those should go with your body and voice. So you sound enthusiastic, you want to look enthusiastic, and so that's what I would have to say about gestures. I like purposeful movement because if you're just doing this, that's not purposeful. It doesn't have any meaning, okay? And so sometimes people use their hands too much, and it's best to
Yes.
leave them at your side. And then when you want to make a gesture, hey, look over there. What did I just say? Let me think about that. So think about your hand gestures and your body going together and so I would just leave my hands down at my side until I really need them. And then if I want to emphasize something. Yeah.
So your keyword is that your gestures should have a purpose.
Yes. And they should go with,
They should complement what you're saying.
that's exactly right. They should
Thank you.
complement. Yeah.
And the next question is, one problem I have is that whenever I'm speaking, I constantly think about what the other person is thinking. This makes me anxious because it makes me speak faster
Mhm.
and fumble. how do I combat this?
Sure. I think I mentioned that earlier. It is natural for audience members, even if they don't want to admit it, that they're judging you. All right. So keep that in mind. It is normal for the audience to evaluate you. But I always say they're evaluating me positively. Okay. I try to keep it in that direction.
Positive.
But I can remember when I would be distracted by something that someone was doing in the audience, but with age and with practice, I got over that. I don't care. So if someone leaned over was whispering, I said, "Oh God, what are they whispering about?" I don't let that bother me anymore. I just go on and because I know that I have something that I want to share with the audience. My goal is to do that. So keep your goal in mind. Don't let what anybody's doing is distracting you. You have a message to share with your audience. Stay with that. Keep
Yes.
that focus.
Thank you. Next question. Due to speech anxiety, the back of my head starts to feel hot and burn. I begin fumbling over my words, and sometimes I forget what I was talking about. I also become preoccupied with what others might think of me, which you already mentioned. I think a lot of people have the same, they are very conscious about what the other person
Sure.
or the audience is going to be thinking.
Yes. Let me go back. I was reading a little bit about anxiety in India. You know, so students suffer from speech anxiety just like we do in the West, you know, so it's sort of a natural phenomenon across many cultures and countries. And so one of the things that many Indian students from India and also from other countries, I've had students from Nepal and I've had them from Saudi Arabia, many of them think that they should be able to speak the English language perfectly. They don't want to make a mistake. So that sets them up sort of like failure, because if you think you're going to speak perfectly, you're not going to have an accent, then you're sort of so give yourself permission to speak how you speak. The audience will adjust their ear to you. So give yourself permission. I may not be able to speak English language perfectly. I may have an accent, but I have the right to be here just like everybody else. And so I'm going to go forward. So you do not have to have precise, you don't have to have, you want to be, I understand that, but you do not have to be perfect. You know, no human is perfect. But we all strive to be the best that we possibly can at something. But give yourself permission to maybe say, hey, you know, my English is not perfect, but it's understandable and I've prepared. I have something that I want to share with my audience. So going back to that may be a physiological response that she's having because she's anxious, and so once she's spoken a few times and that anxiety, she knows, hey, that's my body that's telling me that I'm afraid, and it's getting me geared up for that particular situation. So she understands what's going on with her body, then she may be able to perform and be more effective.
Okay. And we have a question. Does smiling make the conversation more appealing?
Smiling make the conversation more appealing? Yes, I think so. But here again, we can't generalize across every situations, but because sometimes people are smiling because they're afraid too. A smile could be hiding fear. And so what is the purpose of that smile? So are you afraid, you know, or is the smile genuine? Are you really smiling because you are joyful inside? But so that comes across though too. You'll know if the person is smiling for joy or if it's smiling because they're covering up some sort of other,
Sarcasm.
yes, those sorts of things. So
So the other next question is, why do I feel that my mind goes blank? What should I do if my mind goes blank during a presentation? And the other thing is that due to my speech anxiety, the back of my head starts to feel hot. This
yeah,
was a question I think
you had already talked.
yeah.
But let's go back to where the person's mind goes blank, okay? So this student needs more practice, all right? So because it sounds like she's or he could be suffering from maybe severe speech anxiety. and so they probably need more practice. And so, well, here again, I would tell them to take opportunities that come up for her to speak, and try to do it naturally first, okay? If she needs to talk to a doctor or a therapist about it, and they prescribe some sort of drug, but I don't think that's the case here. But sometimes people get so anxious they do go blank, and that means that their anxiety levels are high. And so it may take her opportunities to get over that, or he, and to get over that. So I would just tell them, with practice, that will they'll be able to get their mind. But right now they're not there, okay? They need more practice, need more experience in order so that their mind doesn't go blank. So, but I would tell that person, make sure you give yourself opportunity to speak in public. If there's an opportunity for you to speak, try to do so. Take the lead. If you're in a classroom and you're in a group, tell your group, say, I'd like to try it. I'd like to try being the leader of this group, and I will present our side. But more experience, and that's happens to a lot of students who have severe speech anxiety. Their mind does go blank. I've had students tell me, or just one student said, "Do not look at me," when they got up to speak. "Do not look at me," but we have to look at you. So I said, "Well, why don't you go and take a seat, get your composure, and come back." So someone if you have an empathetic or sympathetic professor, they can help you, all right? And but you may need to talk to a therapist, or someone to help you. Tell them. Self-disclosure was one of the strategies. Self-disclosing that you're anxious is very helpful. It's a treatment for you to deal with your anxiety. So what the self-disclosure, and that doesn't mean in a classroom where your peers are getting up to give a speech that you lean over and say, "I'm so nervous, I think I'm going to get sick." Don't do that to them, okay? But you should tell somebody outside of the classroom, a friend, I get anxious when I speak up and when I have to speak in class, so that you can have that opportunity. And they say, "Well, what makes you anxious?" "Well, I think people are going to look at me wrong. I think people are going to think this about me." And so that's all they're doing, though, is just thinking about how, and audiences will make judgments about you, but it doesn't mean they're making negative. So we build these things up in our head, and you can talk yourself into things, and that's what you need to stop. You stop telling yourself these sorts of messages. But I think self-disclosure is also a very good remedy for dealing with speech anxiety.
I also think one of your other suggestions, and what I saw you practice actually, you took down notes
Yes.
and some keywords.
Mm-hmm.
So I think when we are there, we have a tendency to go blank because of the audience. Not that because we're not prepared, but that moment of panic, it just blanks your mind. At that point of time, I think what you mentioned, to have those notes and those key points, and we shouldn't be embarrassed to use it.
No, that's right. Yeah, you can have. I teach extemporaneous speaking, which means it's conversational in tone, but you don't read your speech. So I've seen a number of presentations, and many people read it for word, but it's best, yes, if you have some note cards or a pad, just have your main points that you want to discuss. And yes, note cards are valid. And you're right, that can help with people who lose their place in their speech, or also forget what they're talking about.
Okay, I hope that helps you. And the next question is, sir, I had the chance to briefly see you this evening near the coffee place. I think you have a friend there. So before the seminar, and one thought has been on my mind since then. As speakers, we are often told to engage the audience, but sometimes the topic itself may not naturally excite everyone. Personally, I tend to become anxious when I feel that the audience is getting restless and lose interest. In such situations, how can a speaker manage their own apprehension and continue communicating effectively without letting that anxiety affect their delivery?
Yes, there's a lot to unpack on
Mm-hmm.
there because here, who is the audience? You know, why are they restless? Uh, and so we'd have to figure that out. What are you talking about?
Mm-hmm.
And what kind of so do you have any activities? You know, examples can help in that particular situation, but what sort of activities can you have planned? So if the audience doesn't seem to be engaged in that particular situation, then it's probably good now to start trying to use other methods, such as small group situations, and asking the audience to get into groups and then to give them an assignment. And that way you can, maybe keep them engaged. Now, what the audience too has to have some investment. Why are they there?
Mm-hmm.
Who you're speaking to.
True.
Yeah, and if that's a classroom assignment, you hope that your peers will give you the same, grace and attention that you gave them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not always the case, but if you do see that your audience is getting restless, what is it that you can do in that particular moment? And I've seen people stop and say, hey, just be honest with the audience too. Say, hey, I see that you're all not really paying attention to me. What's going on? Have an honest conversation with them and see if you can use that kind of approach to get them engaged. Depending on the maturity of the audience too, how old are they? So there are a lot of variables in that
Yeah.
particular situation. But I would just say that try another activity, try another approach. Like as I said, move them into small groups, or move them into, if it's a small enough audience that you could do that, um, or pare them down into interpersonal situations, have them talk to each other, be honest with them. You think your topic is really important to you, but you don't see that
Mm-hmm.
they're interested, and ask them what's going on. What would you what could we do differently here? Because this is something I want to really share with you in that particular. And if it's a class assignment, they may not have that opportunity to do that, but they could stop and say, pause for a moment, and um, and look at their peers,
Mm-hmm.
and just have that confidence to look at them honestly and say, I have something I really want to share with you all today, and I don't feel like you are interested.
Okay. So that spills on to our next question, which is I think you've answered almost all of it.
Mm-hmm.
And how to grab the attention of the audience and keep their focus on you. What are the methods you can use, like, body language
Mm-hmm.
and keywords?
Well, I've I've had students to give presentations on sign language, okay? And a student would start, I'm not don't have the background in sign language, but the student would start out with a sign language. And then they would ask the audience. So having an attention getter that gets the audience's attention. So the student started out with sign language, and then he asked, it was a he asked the audience, do you know what I just signed?
Mm-hmm.
And many of them said no. And so he then told them what he signed. And so then his speech was informative at this particular time. So he said, I'm going to inform you on specific. So what is your attention getter in the very beginning? So I've had students to start out singing
Mm-hmm.
in the beginning of their song, da 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 da. And the student says, do you all recognize that song?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the song is da 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 da. They would tell who it is, and then they were going to give a speech on music therapy. So that was one way to get the audience engaged. So later on, the student would play more music about music therapy, that was appropriate. So thinking about strategies that would be relevant and linked to your topic, okay, can keep them engaged throughout.
Thank you.
And then, excuse me, and one other thing, I've had students to bring in clay, and so the student was talking about play therapy. So they brought in clay, and they passed some of the clay out to the students, and at different times of parts of their speech when it was relevant, the student the students would be engaged with making something with the clay. So
That's innovative.
yeah, it was. I thought it was.
Both the audience and the speaker, they both have that fun and that element to connect with.
That's right. And you still, if you're informative, you meet your speech, or if it's a persuasive speech, or it's persuade to actuate, which means you want them to take action. It all depends on what did you plan on? Who is your audience? And going back to the student who is having difficulty, but you need to know who your audience is, whenever you speak. Analyze them. Who are they? What age group? What is their education? And so male, female students, what's their age? What are their interests? Try to find those things out about your audience. And yeah, these were really interesting things that students did in the classroom.
Yeah, thank you. And we are coming to the end. We have a few more questions, but we're out of time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm going to quickly read through the rest of the questions, and you could probably summarize the answer for us, if that'll be okay. So if it's a presentation, we will be prepared, and we can do it with ease. But what if it comes to a fest or a public event where you have to speak and you're not prepared for the situation?
Mm-hmm.
And how to make yourself stand out while speaking so that you have an active presentation with your audience, not just going on without a meaning to do your present or to do what to do your presenting. I think she means to say not just going on without any meaning with whatever is related to the presentation. Even if I'm prepared for the presentation, I see the moment I see the audience, my heart rate goes high and I start to forget or fumble what I have to say next, and I start getting stuck even on simple words and pronunciations. And how do I overcome them?
Yeah. First, so I would just say that, make sure you have some notes in front of you. Thank you all for the opportunity. It was to be able to speak to you about communication apprehension. And I told you I went from communication apprehension to speech anxiety. Communication apprehension is a broad term, and it also involves other settings, but I wanted to narrow it and discuss with you speech anxiety. We defined what speech anxiety is. We discussed some of the causes of speech anxiety, such as some people, read their body incorrectly, or they don't know what their body's doing, and so they misinterpret it. Then we talked about some strategies that you could use to help you overcome your anxiety. Remember that you don't always have to be so perfect that you're not going to make a mistake. Most often your audience is not going to remember everything. And remember that you're a gift, and keep trying, get all the practice you can so that you can be the person that you want to be in your lifetime. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Karl. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I know that you have many more questions for those who have been struggling with a public audience and speaking in public. What we can do is I've dropped the mail ID. It's connect.coed@christuniversity.in, and you can mail your questions. Please don't hesitate. Even those of you who have already asked questions and you want to frame them better, and you have questions related to the presentation, or you want to connect with Dr. Karl, you can drop your mail there, and Dr. Karl will answer them for you, and I will make sure you get those answers and you do great. So thank you, everyone, for joining.